Video, and I kill the sound here too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Now he should be able to.
Oh, he's muted.
Dave, can you hear us, Delcor?
He went for a snack. If there's anyone online who can hear us, if you'd let us know, that would be appreciated.
There we go.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, well, it is 6 o'clock and I'll call this regular city council meeting to order on Tuesday, February 6, 2024 at 6 p.m. Councilors here tonight are Councilor Deering, Councilor Booton, Councilor Stockwell, Councilor Lozon, and I am Mayor Hemrick, joined by Manager Shirley Castro and Clerk Treasurer Dawes. The meeting agenda is available online and in the back of the room. This meeting has been publicly posted, is being recorded, and subject to Vermont's open meeting law and the council's rules of procedure, both of which are available online. Welcome everybody who's joining us, both in the room and online. If you're online, please keep in mind that the chat function should only be used for technical issues or difficulties and remain muted unless speaking. The city offers online access as a convenience, and we will continue the meeting if any technical difficulties occur. Whether you're online or here in the room, please raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized. And in the room, come forward and speak into the microphone and introduce yourself and state your name for the record. I'll call on speakers in order, allowing those who haven't spoken yet to speak first, and limiting time if we need to so we can get through our agenda tonight. If you have any questions about process or procedures, please ask and we will get it sorted. And with that, I'll take us to adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments to tonight's agenda, Manager?
Not for me, Mayor.
Any from council?
Couple, if everyone is amenable. I'd like to move D and E, which is approving the changes to the grants management policy and discussing changes to the ordinance from FOP contract negotiations. I'd like to move those up to the consent agenda. And then I'd like to add, we received the Sanborn report last week, got a copy of that. And I don't know if Mr. Baker is available, so I'd just like to have a brief discussion, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I just have some questions.
Councilor, if you don't mind, I was going to mention it in the manager's report. So if you're comfortable touching on it at that point, Brian is available.
Might get a little lengthy, that's all. My question.
It's up to you. Yeah. Brian is online for just in case we need him, and so he.
Yeah, I'd like it as a separate item. We had a lot of folks waiting for this report, and I mean, I think you'd agree the implications are kind of far-reaching. So I'd like it at the end of the meeting, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah. Well, great. I'll add discussion of changes to the ordinance from FOP contract negotiations up to consent and add the Sanborn study. But would like to keep the grants management policy under new business just because I have
That's fine.
some questions. And it's a
Like I said, if there's no objections, or if you'd rather keep it as item D, fine with that.
Are there any other adjustments to the agenda? All right, hearing and seeing none. That takes us to visitors and communications. This is an opportunity for anybody to speak to an item that is not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here to speak to an item that is on the agenda, just simply raise your hand when we take up the item of business. Would anyone like to speak to an item that is not on tonight's agenda?
Nicholas, can you get rid of that language thing, just so we can see everybody on the screen?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Hearing and seeing none, that takes us to our consent agenda. We have approval of two sets of minutes, one from one from the special meeting of January 23, and then one from the a regular meeting on January 23. We have the city warrants from the week of January 31st and approval of the city warrants for the week of February 7th. We do have some licenses and permits.
We've got one license. It's a waste disposal collector's license for Casella Waste System, 24 pickup vehicles that they use throughout the city. has the appropriate department approvals, so it's just included in the consent.
Then we have authorization of the manager to execute a lease with Nelson's Ace Hardware for a little section of the parking lot. Approval of the resolution for 2024 3A Headworks loan from the revolving loan fund 356 1.0, and approval of a resolution 2024 03B Headworks loan from the revolving loan, RFA means revolving loan fund? Yeah. 357 1.0, and then the addition by Councilor Lozon to discuss changes to the ordinance from FOP contract negotiations to accept the recommendations of the manager.
So yeah, just for clarification, there's no recommendations per se. This was just a sort of a awareness item. We're expecting to come to the council with first hearing ordinance changes. We just didn't want people to be blindsided. So the packet memo has, I think, sufficient context.
Yep, it sure did, and I appreciate the courtesy, so thank you.
All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lozon, second by Councilor Stockwell. Discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Guys have it, motion carries. That takes us to our clerk and treasurer report.
Okay, just a few things. One, a continuing reminder that, and actually this will be the last regularly scheduled council meeting reminder, that the third quarter property tax payment is due by February 15th. Stop by the office, put it in the mail, put it in the Dropbox, the front of City Hall. Any of those things work. It also works to make payment online. There are service charges that apply if you do pay online, but there is a link on the website that lets you do that. And as an enticement to come into City Hall, we have a whole bunch of free COVID kits that the fire department procured, and they're available here in City Hall. There's a stack of them out in the lobby, plus multiple boxes. And they also have them down at the Public Safety Building. It is first come, first serve, and we're asking people to limit it to 4 per household, just to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get some. But I think we have, what did Joe say, 5,000 or something like that. We have quite a few. We have quite a few. The other thing is that the clerk and treasurer's office is accepting requests for absentee ballots, not only for the March 5th elections that are coming up, but also for all the elections for the whole year. So we're actually encouraging people, sign up now, sign up for the whole year. That way you'll make sure that you get the ballots. We expect to have the school ballots, both the Barry Unified Union School District and the Central Vermont Career Center ballots available the beginning of next week. We already do have the presidential primary ballots, and all of them will be, for those who have requested ballots, they will be popped in the mail as soon as we get them in hand. And people will be welcome to come into the office and vote early in the office. Otherwise, polls are open at the auditorium on March 5th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm going to pass around to all of you the documentation that goes with the revolving loan fund resolutions. There are the top 3 pages there are 2 places for counselors to sign and 1 place for the mayor to sign. So please don't just sign the top page. Look through and sign. You should sign twice in each of the binder clipped packets.
And how long a period of time?
Till the end of the meeting. But sooner would be better. So, and a reminder that the Board of Abatement is holding hearings tomorrow evening. We have 10 that were of the 60 plus that we've got to be heard. And so we're going to start with the 10 tomorrow evening. We will schedule additional hearings for the next 3 Wednesdays, Wednesday evenings here in the council chamber. So people who have requested an abatement hearing, you will be hearing from me with your exact date. So,
Any questions? All right. If there are no questions, that takes us to our Liquor Cannabis Control Board.
we have one liquor license. This is the Grab and Go at 377 North Main Street. Council actually approved their new second-class license back in June. However, there was something incorrect in the entity paperwork, their legal paperwork with the Department of the Division of Liquor Control. So updated, corrected entity information has been submitted for Amsanadev Vermont LLC. And so this is essentially just sort of an update to a corrected second-class license. Does require council approval.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All right, hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Abstain.
Ayes have it. Abstention noted. Motion carries. That takes us to item 7, the manager's report.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'm just going to ask real briefly for folks online. We're trying to troubleshoot something. If people could try to unmute. I got a comment in the chat that people could not unmute them. So it looks like it's working now. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. So a couple items for update, just on the North End public engagement, just really good citywide meeting and ward-based meetings. Next steps is Tess, Councilor Stockwell, and Pat Moulton from Governor's Office are synthesizing results of the surveys and the public comment, and we plan to come back to the council with that synthesis and assessment at the February 27th meeting to keep moving on to the next steps. The advocacy report from the legislature, this is taking on a lot of attention this year, obviously. Continued work on operational funding. We're hopeful that the state will come through with some needed aid, and we're working on those negotiations actively with our partners in Montpelier. We do have, as I mentioned last week, we have positive news on the abatements, which is now awaiting signature from the governor on S-160. So certainly that will help for sure. Local hazard mitigation plan update. So as council knows, the city's plan had expired. We'd hired CVRPC to renew the plan. The next step in the process is a public meeting, which we have scheduled for Thursday, March 7th at the second floor of Alumni Hall from 6 to 7:30. We will be, it's not posted yet on our website, but we will be getting this posted on our website and social media. We received our first installment of FEMA payments this past week, which was $135,000 for representing 75% of the cost to demolish a home on Portland Street and to mitigate some damage on Oswald Street as a result of landslides. These two particular projects, just for context, were completed within the 30 days of the flood because they were in that initial emergency period. So just a reminder that we're now getting that money. We're looking at 6 months post the event. This is going to be a continuing challenge for us as we start to continue to front money and have to wait 6 months for repayment. It's going to start to become more onerous as more projects are undertaken. We have submitted an application to the Emergency Watershed Protection Program. I mentioned to council we were working on this last week. This is through USDA for a rental unit on 52 West Patterson. The city is the applicant on behalf of the landowner. We're working with our attorney to develop an MOU. We will have zero cost to this. This will be the landowner, the property owner will pay the local match, and the property owner will be in charge of the operations and maintenance. They cannot be an applicant, so we are taking that on so that we can save some housing units. But we have got some comments back today, so we're going to revise the application, but that is in the works for that unit. And then I just want to appreciate, we had I think a really positive substantial damage meeting last Tuesday. Just want to appreciate the residents who attended. Obviously a meeting we wish we didn't have to have, but it was good to be able to hear from people and answer some questions. We've had some positive impact as a result of the meeting. Approximately half of the initial recipients on our list have been deemed not substantially damaged, so we're down to about 40 from about the original 86 that we had sent out, which is tracking with a lot of the estimates that we had early on. So this was, I think, helpful that people heard the information. They've, as I've mentioned, they've come to see Janet. So very happy, and just again want to just really thank Janet and Michelle, who do really tough work under really difficult circumstances. They take a lot of incoming, and I think they handled the meeting very well. So very grateful for them. We had 2 structural, excuse me, fire responses in the last week with the fire department. So thank you to Captain Seaton, Captain Charbonneau, who were on shift for both responses. No injuries, no ancillary structures were damaged as a result of either structural fire. Just want to highlight, I know this topic comes up frequently, but we had 70 people hours of mutual aid received from 4 different agencies, which helped us have those positive results of no ancillary structures damage, especially certainly on Harrington Street, where the structures are really close together. A very intense event, and no damage to either property on either side, thanks to our partners. And then I was going to talk about the Pike Street report, but I'll defer that to the item at the end of the agenda. And I want to make sure, Brian, if I can, if you can hang on till that item, I can give you a heads up when we're close to addressing it.
Any questions for the manager?
So people must have been displaced in Harrington, and did they find another place to live?
So I know the landlord was working on that right now. I'm not sure if he's placed all of them, but they were working actively on finding locations for the people in those units. Yeah. The people at Tremont were displaced as well momentarily. It's less damage, but they also had some temporary displacement. They were able to relocate.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Jerry?
What are the next steps in the North engagement process? I know we got to have our different ward engagement sessions. And I think there was a little bit left to be desired by some residents trying to maybe didn't feel like they could express themselves maybe as much. And I'm just looking to see if they're, what the next engagement process is going to look like, just to kind of see.
Yeah, so we have the ward meetings were completed, the citywide meeting was completed. Right now, the idea is to have Councilor Stockwell Tess and Pat Moulton synthesize what was received from those meetings and get that feedback back to council. So we got feedback in multiple ways, which was both the meetings, but also the survey. So those results will be presented to the council as well. I think if the council desires for additional public engagement, we're certainly open to that. We've, I think, started the process that we'd laid out initially with Pat and myself, which Tess and Councilor Stockwell have joined in on. But our next steps at this point were to get the results of the feedback that we got from those meetings to the council to then jointly figure out what the next steps are.
Okay.
So you have I'm sorry, Councilor Lozon.
Thank you. First of all, thank you again for the meeting last week. I thought it went really well. You never know how those meetings are going to go, and it's tough because there were folks there who had suffered. And so I want to thank everyone, all of the participants, especially those folks who under very difficult circumstances kept their emotions in check, kept their frustration in check, and really just got down to business and wanted to know the facts. I want to thank Joe and you and Carol and Janet and Michelle. She wasn't at the meeting, but like you said, there's a lot of incoming at that office on a daily basis, and they're doing a great job. So honestly, the meeting went in terms of I knew the meeting would be informative. I was really concerned that it would come a little off the rails, as folks got emotional or let their frustrations boil over. So I just want to thank participants for not doing that and for keeping the meeting on point and very productive. So hopefully, I think we should do another one in a follow-up meeting in a couple, 3 months.
Happy to.
As a follow-up to Councilor Jennings, so the next steps are to synthesize the surveys and the results of the outreach.
Yep.
Did you have a tentative date in mind?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're planning to do that at the February 27th meeting.
February 27th, got it. And on the substantial damage for the properties that hadn't been assessed for more than a decade, is there any way? I don't know if after debriefing through that meeting, if you found any opportunities to try to close that gap,
Yeah.
that gap between the cost of the repairs and the assessed value?
Yeah, so we're talking to VEM about trying to get some technical assistance about what's possible there. There's obviously a lot of moving pieces with it. You know, would an assessment or appraisal be retroactive, for example, is one of them. It is the big one. Would FEMA accept it? Would the state accept it? I mean, all of these go ultimately through the state, through A&R. So we're trying to get some technical assistance on that front to see if that's some relief that can come to homeowners. And if we are able to provide it, we're certainly able to give people that option.
Sorry about this, sorry.
Councilor Lozon?
Circling back around, I don't want to prolong the discussion, but it's an important one. So talking about the North End and sort of our end game, we've all known, you know, when the administration or representatives from the administration and the governor sat here, we all understood that the end game was a plan. It was a plan that everyone could agree on. And, you know, the folks who participated at the ward meetings and at the kickoff meeting, I thought there were some great suggestions. I've seen some of the concerns that people have about retaining the character of the neighborhood, retaining the opportunity for home ownership, single-family homes. I think that's great, but it's not specific. So at what point do we have, do we get the technical expertise? Not necessarily Black River, they're a fine firm, but maybe they're not the right firm for this. But when are we going to get some visuals, or when, or do you plan on producing some visuals? The date that keeps sticking in my head, and I finally wrestled it at a pat, was March 31st. And it's March 31st really isn't that far away. And we have to develop a plan for the North End by March 31st that everyone can agree on. And like I've said, we all understand that not everyone isn't going to get everything they want. But I want to know what the plan is, working back from that March 31st date. What is the plan to have the technical expertise so we can say, this is Barry's vision? And maybe not everyone agrees with it, but the majority agree with it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that's going to come, you know, we hope to get the shell of that from the council's direction on the 27th, right? So we've gotten, we're going through a lot of information that was provided. We're going through the surveys. And I think that we hope to come out of the 27th with, you know, what the general vision is from this group here, that we could then take that next step with. Now whether we can hire, I don't know whether we get to you know, we're not going to get to an engineered plan by March 31st. That there's just not enough time. So I think what we can get to is a concept and something on a canvas that we can then move forward with. But the idea is to get the shell of that the 27th, based on what we heard from. What we'll share with you is what was shared with us, and hopefully the council can then give us a consensus direction on how to move forward and make it a reality.
So prior to the 27th, I think it would be helpful. You know, I can go to Google Maps. I mean, there are some folks who have reached out and they said, well, you know, I know there are certain folks who are interested in a buyout program. You know, they're frustrated, their homes are damaged beyond repair. But it would be helpful to have a map of the entire North End with those properties marked, so that prior to the 27th, we sort of know what we're working with.
Yeah, we can provide that.
We
have the intakes. It'll be based on the intakes that both VEM and we have received, and so it'll be current as of whatever.
Perfect.
We could run it as of tomorrow. We're happy to run it. Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Right, any other questions for the manager? Seeing none, that takes us to our first item of new business, a volunteer coordinator report. Adam Jacobs. Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to come up here for a while.
We're excited to.
This is so great. Hello.
How are you?
Thank you so much, counselors. It's such a pleasure to be up here to finally talk to you all. And I really appreciate you all hiring me to do this position and letting us have a more service-oriented approach to the city. So I'm just going to go through the report that we have. Here we go. So you hired me in a part-time seasonal job from July 31st to October 23rd. I worked a total of 184 hours. I oversaw 151 non-unique volunteers that accumulated a total of 567 hours over 11 large discrete events, including smaller hub activities. If we go to the next slide, we can see these are the 11 discrete activities. There's a variety of 11 discrete events. There's a variety of activities. For example, there was removing residential debris, helping muck out different residents, helping them move, helping with environmental concerns around the gardens, the rivers, and Green Up Day, as well as canvassing that occurred actually throughout all these different events. On average, there was about 7 volunteers per event, and each volunteer did on average about 3.5 hours. Now, I do just want to emphasize that before I was hired, there was a volunteer crew in July that did 3 large events as well as online activities, and I just continued that work. If we go to the next slide. This is a master map of all the canvassing we did. This was started in July before I was hired, and then I continued it. As you can see, we more or less hit every flood-affected street as well as the surrounding environs. If we can actually skip one slide, move to the next map. Yeah, right there. One of the main things that my job focused on was removing debris from residential property. This continued what the city did in July initially when it had several contractors removing flood-related debris for free. And I was able to continue that work with Saris to help residents move their debris to the transfer station. These highlighted streets right there are over different weekends or days. We were able to get volunteers to remove that debris. The black stars you can see that's what happened on that particular bulky waste and tire disposal day when we were able to get residents and help them move their waste up into the auditorium in September. If we can go back a slide now. Yeah, so there were several out-of-state organizations that came to help us. This is in addition to the VOAD, the volunteer organizations active in disaster relief. These are different corporations or educational groups. One of my jobs was to bring them in and then plug them into the different needs that we had. So you could see we have the Allagash Brewing Company, Lawson's Finest Liquids, several tech companies, Pediatric Solutions, Technology Management. We had a church from Burlington, Dartmouth University students, a public school in Maine, and even other organizations as well. But this is just a list of them that helped come for us. If we can then move to the next map. Yes, so this is Green Up Day, where we had 81 volunteers who accrued about 325 hours, and that was focused. We cleaned up along Main Street as well as surrounding neighborhoods, but we were able to focus specifically on the library, the Odd, Rotary Park, Dente Park, Nativi, Brook Street, and several other places around there. So that was Green Up Day. And then if we want to go to the next slide, I want to now give you a sense sort of this platform we use. This is Crisis Cleanup. This is an open technology web-based platform where VOADs and other volunteer organizations can collaborate and share information about different cases, as well as coordinate who is going to receive or give different services. So the state really urged us to use this platform. Not every community in Vermont did, but in Berry City, we tried really hard to do that. We would, with our canvassing effort, try to find anyone who might have been affected by the flood and put them in the system. So as you can see, these are many of the dots from 2023 Northeast flooding. There were 3,408 cases, dots related to that flooding. If we zero in on it, the next slide, you can start to see that a lot of them circulate around Berry City for a variety of the reasons I said, as well as that Berry City was hit incredibly hard. If we go even closer, you can start to see how it's dispersed around various neighborhoods. And I just picked a few of the harder hit places. If you want to go forward even one.
Ask one question.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
What do the icons mean?
Yeah, so the icons mean, and this you can all find if you go to the website, this is all public information. The icons mean a variety of things. The boots meant like a major work task was mucking out. The trash can means debris. The fan meant mold removal and remediation. The tree meant a tree with the structure. The red ones mean that the case was never claimed by an organization. The orange meant it was claimed but not completed, or parts of the work task wasn't completed. And the green ones were closed, actually.
Is there a difference in the color of green?
There is, and you can find this all on the crisis cleanup website. Absolutely. Like the green might have been, it was claimed by my organization and completed by me.
Yep.
Or light green was, it was claimed by me, but actually someone else completed it.
Okay.
Or the resident doesn't need help anymore.
Sure.
But yeah,
Okay.
there's a whole list of all of them. Thank you. So if you go forward a slide, you can see how, oh, no, back, sorry, back. Yeah, you can see how in the north end in Ward 3, there's a variety over the numbered streets and Scampini Square. We have Gunners Brook and Maple Avenue along Ward 2, and then Courier Park in Ward 1 and 2. So you can see how all the wards were affected by this. If you go to the next slide, there was 370 individual cases or home in Berry City in a crisis cleanup. Obviously, this isn't not a full representation. We're not able to get everyone, but we got a lot of people. Out of those 742 work tasks, and that means that each individual case might have had 3 work tasks, right? They might have needed mold, debris, and a muck out. So out of 742 work tasks, 528 were closed for a 73% completion rate. The average for the 2023 Northeast flooding was 65% completion. Once again, this data, I'm not sure I sifted through it correctly. I even spoke to the executive director, Mr. Aaron Titus, and I'm still not sure exactly with these bottom 2 sentences, but he did assure me that Berry City did have an above average completion rate for crisis cleanup, and I think that's a credit to what we did as a city, other volunteers, the outside organizations. All right, if you want to go forward one. So what we did well, and I won't read everything on this, I'll pick and choose some things. What we did well is we had a public-facing hub where residents could localize resources. They could find out where they need to go in the city to get what they needed. They could navigate FEMA options. They could get supplies for rebuild, relief, reconstruction, hygiene. And then as well, what we did, we extended that volunteer trajectory. So a lot of times after the acute phase of a recovery, the volunteerism drops off precipitously. And we were able to continue that and create a steady supply of service-oriented activities from the city to the residents. We continued to have communication memos and updates 2 times, 3 times a week sometimes on the city website, Facebook, as well as emails that I sent out to volunteers. We helped transition specific grassroots groups towards greater city and institutional coordination. And we worked intersectionally. We worked with mutual aid organizations, nonprofits, environmental groups, state and federal agency, and religious groups. Our focus was on a singular goal: bring most relief by most people to most people. That was the overriding goal that I kept in mind. I guess I could say this. I will say city bureaucratic work is incredibly difficult. I learned a little bit about your jobs. This gave me a great appreciation. You are managing multiple levels of focus at the same time. It is overwhelming to interact with both specificity and scope while keeping an organizational grasp and operational heart. So that gave me a great appreciation for what a lot of people in the city try to do. So things I learned to stay vigilant, right? So how do we prepare to prepare better for the next disaster? And we can already see this happening with our long-term recovery groups, Berry Up, Hope Coalition, the fire department, police department, public works. We could see this in December, how the response was faster even before what had happened. I think having a communication agent, a person dedicated to communicating to residents, would be incredibly important. I think we can see how that can alleviate a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. Personally, just for me, is I wish I had a couple volunteers who were specifically, I could just delegate some things to how to coordinate or grid up the city to make some of the scope a little easier to manage. But in general, I think grouping potential volunteers into several cohorts could be helpful. So the Southern Baptist Disaster Relief and other churches do this. They will call up a group from a state for 2 weeks, then they'll go back. Then another group will come from another state and go back. So I think giving volunteers possibly numbers after a flood and saying, you should all come this weekend, you all should come next weekend, you all should come this day. I think it would help extend the volunteer energy, and we could really parse and specify which jobs are needed instead of everyone coming all at once the week after the flood happens. I think implementing a street captain team is a great idea. I know Tess is involved with that idea, thinking about it. Shauna from the Rainbow Bridge Center. This is someone who would help kind of be a point person for the neighborhood, disseminate information, be a liaison or representative to the city, help coordinate preparation. I think these ward meetings that we all do is a really great start that we started to do. And I will skip the next slide, so I'm good. Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome overview. Thank you.
Is there any
Nicely
questions or?
Did you have enough information about what could be done? So you have to track all these requests for help
Yeah.
and what they need, but did you have enough information about how you can muck out safely and what do you do with the waste and when do you know when you're in over your head?
I think
So to speak.
what helped actually was, so in July, before I was hired, I worked with the Rainbow Bridge Community Center, I worked with the Red Cross, and that started already coming on my mind. I was like, how do we muck out safely? You know, what PPE do we need? What's the appropriate way to manage an acute disaster response? So when I got hired, these were things already I brought to the table. And then there were obviously volunteers who worked with me that gave me direction. And then huge VOAD organizations, the Southern Baptist Disaster Relief. I know I mentioned the Red Cross, some of the other ones. I would ask them continually, you know, how do you do mold remediation? How do we do trainings for this? So I would believe, yes, when I was able to advocate, I was able to get the information. Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
I did see Jackie McCarty, you put something in the chat that if you're comfortable sharing out loud, that'd be great. And if not, we could read it. Oh, your sound's not coming through. Yeah, I see. We can see you talking. Well, I just thought it was a nice positive thing for Adam to hear, but it's. I cannot fully express how grateful we are for all the volunteers who helped us save our house on First Street in July. The empathy and grit the volunteers exhibited was remarkable. Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie. Thank you, yeah.
Councilor Deering?
So is there anything that the city could have done better to help you in your role as a volunteer coordinator next time?
There's not going to be one.
Yeah, okay, wake up.
I think in my role specifically, I'd say no. I remember telling my friends when I did the interview for the job with Nicholas and Stephanie, the first thing they said was actually, you know, if you get this job, what can we do to help you do it? And I think I got full support and access. I think for me doing my job, absolutely, there was nothing the city could have done better. I think I felt I would see you all around town and you expressed your appreciation. And I think it was just giving someone an opportunity to do this, to say this is worthwhile, is an important aspect of disaster relief. I think was incredible. Yeah.
I greatly appreciate what you've done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilor Lozon?
Thank you. You have done a great job.
Thanks.
And thanks for, consolidating 7 months of hell. That was awesome.
Yeah.
What I'm more interested in is where do we go from here? How do we continue? How does the city continue to work with you and to continue? Well, right now there's snow on the ground.
Right.
There's a lot of debris out there. There's a
Right.
lot of damage still that we can't see.
Yeah.
And soon enough, supposed to be in the 40s for
Right.
like 4 days in a row this week. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So more important, so I guess what I'm really interested in is how do we continue to work with you? How do we continue to keep volunteers engaged so that when it is spring and we've got a whole 4 or 5 months of decent weather to get some things done, we can harness the energy of our volunteers and get it done?
I think the best thing I could think is kind of the third point on here, bringing most relief by most people to most people. I think the more we start getting a little circumscribed or closed or like, I can't work with this person or this, or like usually in real life we disagree, I think that's when the volunteerism and the love kind of stifles a bit. But the more people are saying like, I keep remembering disaster relief, And so I'd like to work with this organization. I want to bring in this organization. For example, Hope Coalition will be doing work then. Bury Up will be doing work then. The Rainbow Bridge will be doing work then, right? The Red Cross might be here, you know, other community organizations. I think continuing to say, how can we work together to keep helping our residents in the strongest way possible? And that we just keep that on the goal. I think that is a good.
And who's going to coordinate that?
I don't know. This is a personal question for me. I know I am. I don't know where I'm going to be in the springtime. But there are certainly people who will be able to step up if I'm not necessarily able to take a strong role in that or something. But I will certainly keep the communication open. Yeah.
Oh, thank you
Yeah, no,
again
thank
for
you.
how far you've taken us. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I really, and I'm sorry, only because I love plugging this thing. So I read the book The Plague by Albert Camus, and all I can say is I recommend this book to everyone. It helped me so much. And what I love about what we did as a city is I feel like hiring me and what we did in this most strongly resembled what they were able to do in this book in a beautiful way. I think we got the closest to emulating some of the beautiful human response that happened in this book to the plague. Obviously the flood's not the plague, but the closest to emulating this. And so I really appreciate this. And so that's my personal promo.
What's the last name of the author?
Albert Camus, Camus.
Maybe we need a community book group.
Yeah, we could all read it.
There you go.
That's a cool idea.
Council's Book of the Month.
Thank you all so much, really.
Thank you,
Much
Adam.
appreciated.
Thank you, Adam. Well done.
Mayor, the next item, Ms. Gould isn't able to join us till 7, so I don't know if we want to.
Sure, we can bump
Try
that
it.
down. To 7 o'clock. Okay. So we have our TIF annual report with the clerk.
Yeah, and I mean, typically this is done under a consent agenda, so I'm not sure what points of discussion people might have. I provided you with a copy of the report, and because the report is in an Excel format and the cells don't expand when I print it to show you what the text is in each cell, I also provided you with the text so that you could read the entire thing if you had really nothing better to do.
Maybe.
But
I have nothing better to do.
one of the interesting things in this year is, even though this was the 2023 annual report, which covered fiscal 2023, they did ask us for information on the flood, even though that happened post FY23. So there is some language in there with regards to the flood. It's always an interesting exercise. We haven't had any TIF activities since the completion of the Pearl Street Pedway. So we're not reporting on new, construction and that kind of stuff at this stage of the game. But it still is an interesting opportunity to look back at and reflect on, what businesses have opened, what businesses have closed or have moved here or moved out, and what have been the impacts. I like having the opportunity to look back over the year and kind of synthesize that information for VEPSI, the Vermont Economic Progress Council. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for the clerk?
There's no action required by the council. We're required as part of the certification to present it to the council. And we just have to note on the certification documentation that we return to VEPSI the date on which it's presented to the council. So
Thank you for all that work and providing us the update.
And my intention is to continue to work on TIF stuff even after I'm gone. The manager and I have talked about.
Where are you going?
Huh?
She's
I'm
not
going
going
home.
anywhere.
Is that Northfield?
No, we sold that house. I don't go home anymore. And they repainted it and we hate the color. So no, we're not going home to Northfield. But, my intention is to continue to, at the very least, we've got 8 more years of TIF annual reports that we have to do. And, the hope is that the TIF action team that is currently meeting will help us identify what's next as we continue our review. It's been almost 12 years since the original TIF application the TIF plan was approved. And of course, tremendous changes have happened in the world, in Barry, in private development, in public development in the city, and having this opportunity actually to review and adjust based on the changes is a bit of a gift. So, having this chance to look at what the needs are now is good, and to have the extra time as was granted by the legislature. So,
But we need more.
yeah.
I mean, seriously,
Oh, yeah.
we need, and I appreciate, a lot of us lobbied the legislature hard to get it extended. We need that again. We didn't make up COVID. We didn't make up the floods, but these are all, I don't see a practical way, and especially with what is going on, our plans for the North End and how we continue to support that. I've already, just to let you all know, I've already started talking with folks in the legislature about extending it, yet again. Because I think and thank you for this, Carol, because, sometimes, especially after July and the damage that so many people suffered, it's easy to get all doom and gloom. But there's also a lot of opportunities. We are creating jobs. We are seeing growth within the district. People are doing things, but we're simply going to need more time. Because, there is another crisis coming. You heard it here first. The commercial real estate crisis that is coming in 2025 is going to make the subprime mortgage crisis look like a coin drop. Yep. And we're going to have an opportunity to develop the upper floors of buildings in our downtown. A lot of places around America are. So thank you for this, but I think as a city, we should be going back to the legislature and see if we can't get another extension approved.
I hadn't thought about it, but it's a valid argument to be making. So, yeah.
Well, we need all the help we can get
Yep.
at this point.
Yeah.
That's Booton.
Wonder if we could not only get it extended, but, expanded. That would be kind of
That's
nice.
not likely to happen.
I know, but it sure would be nice.
We could submit another application.
So how
Not
big
until,
is the,
currently, under current law, not until this one is completely done.
Unless you get
which
an
means-
exception.
Right, exactly.
so how big, because Burlington had their wharf, right?
Oh, they had
They had 3 of them?
three,
Three of them.
Nice.
but
to
they're
know.
Burlington.
Yeah, well, but I'm assuming that the size of that was probably bigger than what we have.
It was enormous.
Yeah, so.
Well, it's what you identify. I
Correct.
mean, and, they
have a
did
great
with the changes
identification
that
down there.
were approved last year. One of them was no adjustments to boundaries. Up until that point in time, you could actually make a request to adjust a boundary. But that's not an option anymore. So at least under the current, the way the law reads now. But again, the case could certainly be made that we need to extend it down North Main Street, that we need to, that we need to do pocket TIFs, and that's something that has been talked about, that if we had a TIF that incorporated the Prospect Heights area, that there would be a great way to involve, to create a public-private partnership with regards to the infrastructure needs up there, that certainly if we extended down to the north end, the public-private development of housing, development of flood mitigation. There are certainly arguments for a number of different areas around the city that could benefit. we have to work within the strictures of what's in statute at the moment, but also open up the opportunity to make our case. So,
Thank you, Carol.
yeah, this one's under my skin. I'm stuck with it. Even once I'm gone as clerk, I'm gonna be
She's
stuck
working
with
that
this one.
contract really hard.
Yeah, no, TIF is,
I
yeah.
would move that the council accept the
Generous
TIF
offer.
report as presented by the clerk and also appoint the clerk perpetual TIF queen.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Thank you, Michael.
TIF Queen.
TIF queen.
The minutes aren't going to reflect the TIF queen, but it will reflect the
That was-
acceptance
that was
of the
the motion,
report.
ma'am.
was the motion.
Ms. City Clerk, you're charged with scribing accurate minutes. That was in fact the motion.
There's a
Sorry.
motion to accept the report in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye,
All those opposed?
Your
Ayes have it.
Majesty.
So that takes us to 6:51. So then we have some proposed changes to the grants management policy. And this was one Nicholas had on the consent agenda, and I thought it would be good just to have a chance to talk over some of the changes. And
Yeah, so the packet included a memo with the draft changes marked up. This really came about from, we were working with FEMA to get our reimbursements, which I went ahead and accepted because we just need the cash. But when we get reimbursed from FEMA, it's technically comes to us in the form of a grant. And so this when we were reviewing this, said, well, does this trigger the grants management policy, which has all these steps added to it? And so we thought prudent that FEMA grants, because there's really a reimbursement for work we've already done, shouldn't really fall into the strictures of the grant management policy. So we went to amend the policy, and just because we were there, I got feedback from department heads about things that could be amended in the policy, which is what's reflected in the document. So a lot of this is really just conforming and conforming language changes for clarity, silly things like capitalizations being consistent for, formal terms. And then there are a couple of substantive changes that really, I think, are captured. Let's see page numbers on here. I'm sorry, but there's an exceptions policy section that was added to the end, which talks about exceptions from this policy for certain types of grants, which are, like I said, reimbursements from other governments that take the form of grants like FEMA, eventually like EWP, the Patterson Street project, because we will be receiving that funding as a grant as well. And then administrative grants, which this was actually already included in the policy in another section. So this is things like passive grants, grants with no match requirements that fund existing operational functions or asset replacement upgrades. So this is really, if you think about 2 weeks ago, the council had on the consent agenda a JAG grant from the police department that funds replacement patrol rifles and badges, I think, right? So this is something that is funded in our budget anyway. We're getting an external source of funding for it. So if we're getting a grant that really just saves the city money with no match requirements for something that's already funded, we thought that should qualify as sort of an exemption from the policy. And then this threshold was added because the $25,000 is the threshold in procurement policy that is also used for procurement. So any contract the city does above 25,000 has to come to the council. So we just sort of applied similar concept and a similar threshold here. I think the other, if I'm remembering, the other substantive change is the policy requires both the council to approve an application and to approve receipt of the award. So we thought that might be duplicative in the cases where the council has approved an application and the award is basically the same, is either the same or materially the same from what was applied for. So we thought that eliminates a redundant step in our minds. So I think the language in here says that unless a grant agreement has materially changed since the grant was applied for, that we could just administratively accept a grant. Now, some grants require a legislative body receipt, so obviously we wouldn't do anything about those. This is for things that can be done administratively only. So I believe those are the only material changes. I'm going to look back at the memo because I think I listed all those out. Otherwise, this was really, like I said, an effort to fix the FEMA grant issue. And then while we're in the grant, just to make some changes that we had identified on the staff level as productive, or, you know, to increase our operations. So
Overall, it's just really about kind of streamlining
yeah,
and having to come to council less for approvals.
I think it would result in coming to council less for approvals, but I think the standards we set are pretty limited and narrow, and I think the rationale is that I think there's a really good rationale for it. So as I said, administrative grants was already in there as an exception. It was just in another section of the grant. I just copied and pasted that language down. And then the other two that we've added, the rationales I mentioned is, you know, things that fund no match requirements and fund existing operational. So we're not looking to make new policy with a grant. This is like the JAG grant from last week, which was funding a badge and a patrol rifle. And then the under 25,000 is just to match it to the procurement policy. So those were the rationales that we thought were consistent with things that, you know, the council has already really done.
Would you be open to having a provision where council would be notified by you when a grant award is made? That way we're getting communication about the grants that are.
Yeah, so right here, this line says, the city manager shall notify the city council of any grant applications made or accepted by the city under this section.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
we'll do that.
were you thinking that that would be by email as part of the council packet, that the public would be aware of which grants are moving forward?
We can do it however, yeah, really however the council sees fit. I mean, we can include them in the packet. We can do them as part of the manager's report. I think we have a similar, it's somewhat similar provision in procurement policy that if we do an emergency procurement, but I believe that it just goes to the mayor. Yeah, so that's an email notification. But yeah, we're happy to, you know, sort of incorporate that into our manager's report or council packets.
I think it's just good for there to be public transparency about which grants are getting funded, and then how those non-tax revenues are coming on the books. So,
Yep, we agree.
so you'd be open to that?
Well, I think it's covered in here. I think if we need to amend that to be more specific, certainly happy to make it more specific. I do, you know, I do note that, you know, people have different philosophies on specificity of policies. So this policy had references to SharePoint that never materialized, that are removed here. So I think we can either keep it as notification, or we can say what type of notification is, and, you know, a future council might think that a different notification is better, but we're certainly not, you know, it's embedded in here, so I certainly don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, I mean, you could put it as just put it as a bullet point under city manager's report.
Yeah.
And if you accept a grant for $25,000, just say accepted JAG grant, $25,000.
That's how I was planning
And it's
to
a
do
bullet
it.
point, and then,
Yeah, that's how I was planning to do it, because
Perfect.
it's a good news thing, right? Like we try to give, you know, those types of.
I mean,
positive updates.
noting that most of the grant applications or grant acceptance ends up under the consent agenda anyway, with very little discussion, I think what you're doing makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
So I would move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. That takes us to item B, an approval of a mediation facilitation contract. And we're
I
at
don't see
7
Ms.
o'clock, right?
Gould. Yeah, I don't know if Emily is.
Approve. What? Well, we can still have a discussion.
I don't see Emily on.
All right, well, we've taken off so the contract negotiation things went up, so that takes us to the Sanborn study Pike Street report, if
Sure.
want to knock that out, and then we'll
Sure.
get a little bit more
Sorry,
time.
let me bring this
So-
back
One
up.
point on that. Counselor Wazazak isn't here. Counselor Chambel isn't here. Should we, I mean, seems weird that they're not going to have a say in approving the mediation contract, not looking to stall anything or put it off, but it's kind of weird when you don't have, I mean, normally we have 7, and I know Counselor Wozniak had some questions a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if Counselor Shamble did or not, because there was no action on it, but they're not here, and I wonder if as a courtesy, maybe we should
there's
wait until
Emily.
our next meeting so that they can be here.
Well, great. Well, I do think we were, we had scheduled to have a potential facilitator at least here tonight. So even if we delay it, might be good to honor that time being given.
And she's here.
All right. Did you want to provide any just general context or?
No, I just to let council know, as you saw in the packet, the draft contract was included.
Yep.
So that was all I had to share. And then Emily, if you'd like to unmute, make sure we can hear you.
Thank you.
Oh, good. So, yeah, so Emily was invited to sort of introduce herself and talk more about the process. And so I really, unless Councilor Stockwell would like to provide any other comments, I'd turn it over to Emily.
No, I think it's best to have Emily speak for herself, and I think this is an excellent opportunity for people to ask questions, and then we'd have that as background going into making a decision.
Emily,
Shall I proceed? Well, first, hi, everyone.
hi.
And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to have a conversation with you. Just want to acknowledge, as you might be able to see, I'm working in Boston today, and I just checked into a hotel, so that's why you may see a bed behind me, but I wanted to make sure I was in a place where I could talk to you this evening on your timetable, so please forgive the informality. And to the mayor and the city manager and all of the Barre City Council, please know I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better. I am unfamiliar with this setting, so please guide me as to protocol. I like it if you call me Emily. I'll presume to call you by your titles unless you tell me otherwise. So what I had thought I would do is both introduce myself a little bit, especially in the local context, because the bio that you got, I actually no longer work in Vermont, but so that's kind of a public facing bio, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about the work I've done in Vermont, because I'm gonna say I lived here, even though, you know, I've lived my whole adult life in central Vermont. So I want to locate myself in your community. And then I also wanted to say a little bit about what mediation is or isn't, and some of the principles of mediation. And then I wanted to just briefly say what was in my proposal, and I understand you have it before you, and then I'm happy to answer any questions or engage in any dialogue that you'd like. And Mr. Mayor, I can't see everybody, so if somebody's raising their hand, I would ask that you let me know.
I will.
And so I don't want to gloss over everything. You know, I wish I could be with you in person so I could see you. So first, I just want to acknowledge, you know, I'm from Montpelier, and in a way, I live in Montpelier now. And I'm aware that all of us have been through something really big at the same time. But I think you guys really, in Barry, I mean, you've taken a harder hit. And I just want to acknowledge that. I'm your neighbor, and I feel for what you're dealing with and what you're have been through. And just to acknowledge that just because I'm a fellow Vermonter and a neighbor doesn't mean that we've been through the same thing. I just want to say that. So I've lived in the town of Washington while we built our house in Williamstown, and raised my children in Williamstown, and was a member of the church in Barry for 20 years. So I do feel connected to your community. My daughter went to St. Monica's, and so and you may know my family because we're a family of musicians, and you've probably seen us one way or another at the Barry Opera House if you attend. But that said, my professional life in Vermont began as an assistant attorney general, and I am a lawyer. I've always been a government attorney, and I was a criminal prosecutor in Massachusetts before I got hired by the AG's office by Jeff Amistoy. And I was primarily director of the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, which meant that I prosecuted staff on patient abuse in Medicaid-funded facilities. And a lot of work I did, the bulk of my work, although there were certainly issues in nursing homes and the elderly, but the cases that came to me that I did my primary work on was staff on patient sexual abuse in psychiatric facilities. So as a lawyer, and in terms of the contribution I made, it's in that area of the law. When Bill Sorrell came in, he wanted us all to do something else, and I was a general counsel to the Agency of Agriculture for a while. When I left law practice, I didn't know I thought I was just taking time to be with my children, but I did decide that when I came back, I'd like to come back as a mediator and as a neutral. And I trained at what was Woodbury College. They offered that. And so as a mediator in Vermont, I mediated many different kinds of cases. There's not enough work as for a mediator to just do one thing. So I've done special ed mediation. I've done employment discrimination mediation. I've done family farm transition mediation and other issues arising in the agricultural context. I was, of course, a family court mediator. And I'm sure I'm missing something else, but there's a variety of types of cases in Vermont. But I will say that because I was not a civil litigator, like I didn't try cases in the civil context, I tended to do work as a mediator more for organizations, for nonprofits, public policy disputes, and generally work with boards. And so this is a context in which I'm familiar working, even though I haven't worked with you. I certainly have worked, especially since I started working in other states, with public bodies. Yeah, deep respect for the open meeting law and what the value it brings to the community. And I also know that sometimes that can get in the way of the types of communication that makes the work more efficient for public bodies. So anyway, I've been an adjunct professor at Vermont Law School. I closed my practice in Vermont because I got a job teaching at Columbia Law School. And since that time, most of my clients are outside of Vermont, either in other states, but I also work internationally. So that's just a little bit about my background. And so unless there's any more that I can say about that, I'd just like to talk a little bit about mediation. I did chair the alternative dispute resolution section of the Vermont Bar Association for 10 years and was responsible for lobbying for the passage of the Vermont Mediation Act, which is the law that kind of governs mediation. And there, it's a mediation if the person facilitating the conversation holds themselves out as a mediator. That's what mediation means in Vermont. It doesn't specify any particular process. But there are some legal protections that come from the term mediation. And those are primarily some protections for you and some for me. Mediation is confidential, and then what that means is that I can't talk to anybody else about what's said in a mediation. I'm held to a standard of confidentiality. The people involved are free to decide for themselves what they're free to say about it, but I am bound to keep it confidential. And just the protection to me is that I can if I'm serving in this capacity, I can be protected about being subpoenaed to say what happened. So it's in that way a protection to the parties and to me, but it doesn't impact at all what the participants decide about what's public or not. So that's just something about the word mediation. And it brings me to, there are 3 principles of mediation as I practice it. And I practice a style of mediation that's called facilitative mediation. And those 3 principles are confidentiality, voluntariness, and party empowerment. And I'll just speak briefly to what these means, and then I can get on to the proposal. There's no secret to why mediation works. But if there's any secret ingredient, I do believe that the confidentiality of the process does help. It gives people a freedom to speak their mind, and in a way that it just doesn't when we're being recorded or in other ways public speaking. So I can't really define it, but I just know that confidentiality helps. The other aspect of mediation is voluntariness. And what that means is by showing up, you're not agreeing to anything other than the fact that you walked into the door. You can stop the mediation, you can leave the mediation, and you can also engage with the mediator facilitator as to what's going to happen next in the room. I'm not here to impose anything on you. It is a a co-design process that's happening all the time in mediation. I have some structures to suggest, but you're always at choice as to what happens next. And you're always free to end the session without any agreement. You're not bound to agree to anything. So that's what voluntariness means, and it's at the root of how I practice, and I believe how many mediators practice. That said, there are many, mediation happens in lots of different contexts. And so labor mediation is very different from what I do. And there are all sorts of mixed models where the mediator is expected to make a decision if the parties can't decide. But in the types of work that I do, that's not an issue, although it's very legitimate practice in other contexts. And which brings me to the concept of party empowerment. I would not come in thinking that I know anything about how you all should decide. I really am here if you decide to go forward in a facilitative way. And I wouldn't be comfortable with a request to be a decision maker. So really what happens, it would be in your hands. And which kind of brings me to my proposal, which was to propose that the topic of the conversation be, what are the factors that as a group you would decide you'd like to take into account when you're making housing decisions? And I propose that just as a kind of principled decision-making, to have a list of factors that you consider when you're making a decision. And I understood that for Barre, like other cities, housing is a major issue. So that was what I was proposing to be the subject of the conversation, with the understanding that part of what can happen in this context is really for you to decide upon your leadership. And leadership always involves a balance between getting the task done and the relationships required to get the work done. And so this is a way to work on both the task and also a little bit on the relationships that allow the task to get done. I'll just say that in my current incarnation, mostly what I do is leadership development, and I do that for courts and governments and nonprofits. So I do hold that lens that there's a balance between the task and the relationships, and finding a way to how one supports the other is kind of the nature of the inquiry.
Emily, there's one hand up from Councilor Booten, but thank you for credentialing yourself and explaining the proposal. Councilor Booten.
Yeah, so I think we get stuck on the mediation versus facilitation. I've been part of a strategic planning through the Justice Center, and it was facilitated. I can't remember who it was. Is that the type of facilitation that you're talking about doing? Where, because in that particular, let me explain. What we did is we had, multiple, boards that we put our ideas up on, and then we talked about that. I know that this mentions executive session, but I don't think there's no way we're going to get into executive session with this, given that it's housing, because it's for a public. We're just not, unless we're talking about purchasing property, and I don't think we're going to do that. But is that what you would offer?
That is certainly the type of thing I would envision, and I'd be interested to hear from all of you. What are the things processes that you've engaged in that you think are productive, that you'd like to, propose that we engage in. And so I would be very interested to know what you've done that you thought was useful and run a process like that. Absolutely. That's what I was imagining. I have some frameworks for how to do that, but I'm sure that's the kind of co-creative process that I would imagine. But that said, you might not need me to, there are lots of good facilitators. And I'm not attached to you doing this work with me. And if there was another, I bring a certain lens as a mediator that's slightly different from just facilitating. And so you might find someone who's has more experience in the kind of process that you're describing, Counselor. And I would encourage you to consider whether that's a better fit.
So I have several questions, but I think they're
Yeah.
going to be directed towards staff and not you, Emily.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge I can't see you.
Oh, you can't? I'm right here. Oh, no.
Maybe I just, will you say something again? Let's see.
I'm the big guy on the screen.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to kind of figure out how to minimize. There you are. Okay, thank you. Sorry, it was a voice from behind. So great to see you. And, yes to what you're saying. I'm happy to do that kind of thing. And it might not be me that you need. It could be another facilitator. Because I do bring an orientation that is around also paying attention to both what you want to get done and what might get in the way.
Are there other questions for Emily before we pivot back to Councilor Booton's questions for staff and council? Councilor Deering?
I'm just curious what we're trying to facilitate or mediate. I mean, I guess that's my root question. What is the purpose of this session or the sessions, and what are we trying to accomplish? Because I don't know, and this is the second time that we've discussed this, and I still have no idea what we're trying to facilitate or mediate or really accomplish by what we're doing. So I just kind of want to know, like, are there sides to something? Is there a debate or an issue? I just don't understand the terminology and the course of action, and it just kind of baffled a little bit. So are you or maybe even Councilor Stockwell able to answer what we're trying to facilitate or mediate?
I'll let Emily go first.
Okay.
What I understood was that you had many difficult decisions to make, and that as much progress as you've made, there was a desire to have more efficient and productive conversations. That was how I heard the request when it came to me. So I understood that I was offering a framework for how you might work more efficiently and productively at a little less personal cost to showing up. That's how I understood it. And, but on the other hand, you're absolutely right. It is, that's what I heard, but I didn't hear from all of you. So I was kind of taking a stab, and that's why it's in the form of a proposal. And if there's something else that you either would want me to do or someone else you'd want to work with, I think that's a totally fair conversation. I didn't understand that there were sides, particular sides. I understood that there was really a diversity of opinion. And part of what I was suggesting is here's some way that you could integrate the beautiful diversity of thinking that you all represent into in a way that's efficient and productive and it's just a little less. I mean, I know, you're public servants and it's hard sometimes to be in the fire all the time. And if I could offer something that would make it feel a little easier and more efficient and productive, that's where I was coming from. But it's a fair conversation to have. Totally.
Thank you, Emily. Byrne Rose, you have your hand raised?
Hi, I think Sam had something to say, and I'd like to hear that. But I'll just take this and say, hi, Emily. It's absolutely so fantastically wonderful to see you. And I can attest to having participated in trainings with Emily in totally different settings, and having come away being a more fully engaged person, understanding myself more and understanding other people's viewpoints more. And if you're going to have someone, I really recommend that Emily be the person. Thank you, Emily.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I think the housing decisions and the decisions we have before us are so extremely important that if we can do something around the housing that's just an agreement about directions, and it's facilitated in such a way that we all feel maybe a little more comfortable, or we don't, but at least it's an opportunity to try, that's worth trying. That's all.
So Council Booton?
All right, so the executive session stuff is going to be a real sticker.
I'm a no. I'm a hard
Yeah,
no.
because you got to get out of that like substantial disadvantage to the public body, and there is no substantial disadvantage, so it would be in public session. And I would ask, has the attorney looked at that?
So we consulted with VLCT, the Municipal Assistance Center, and they said that mediation itself is eligible for, mediation may be conducted in closed executive session, and they gave a statutory citation after making a specific finding that premature general public knowledge. So it's up to the council, but the advice they gave us is that mediation may be conducted in executive
I thought
session.
we were
So-
facilitating,
See, and that's, yeah.
what I just heard from Councilor Stockwell, and I agree, I thought we were facilitating the best decision on housing so that everyone gets on board. That is not
Not
executive session.
Yeah.
That is not transparent, and I will be a hard no.
Yeah, as will I. So, I mean, if we're talking about facilitation, I have no problem doing it. I will mention that as we have that struggle to go into executive session as well, so won't the Jedi. They won't be
They
able
would
to
be
go.
under the same, they would
Yep.
be under the same, yeah.
So
advice, yeah.
it would definitely be a problem there too. I would definitely want to let them know that. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, if we're facilitating the conversation about housing, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I went through that strategic planning with the Justice Center, and I thought it was really good. And I was the one that was on the out, and it was still a really good session. So,
Great. Could we revise the
Councilor
contract and
Lozon?
bring it back?
oh,
Like, could we revise the contract and bring it back next week when Councilor Shamble and, well, hopefully Councilor Shamble and Councilor Wazazak, I'm sorry, 2 weeks, when Councilor Shamble and Councilor Wazazak are here in case they have any questions as well?
So what contract revisions are you looking for?
Well, there was a contract here, but the problem is the contract talks about, the mediator has been informed by the client, I don't know, one may, that the mediation will be a confidential process held in executive session, as a result, not subject to provisions of the open meeting law.
Yeah.
So that would definitely, and I really would like to have Counselor Jambel and Counselor Wazazak especially get an opportunity to weigh in, because Counselor Wazazak had specific concerns about this the last time we met.
Joellen Mulvaney?
Thank you. Good evening. A couple of things. We have just embarked as a city on a program is from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns called the Cohort Program. And one of the things our relationship with that organization is very important. It not only gives us our insurance for liability, but it's also been very helpful in transforming a lot of the municipal operations in a way that meets with modern day, including making the city a more welcoming place. That's what the cohort piece is all about. So I'm concerned about a couple of things. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns also is the funder through the Vermont Community Fund for this mediation process. And they were very excited about the opportunity to use it in this way, including the ability to do it in executive session. And I think you misunderstand. This is not a session that is going to help you make a decision about what to do with housing. It's simply a way to develop a methodology, a way to communicate with each other so that you can actually get the best out of each other. We know that there have been difficulties with communication in the past, and I don't think that there have been any attempts really to make some significant changes there. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, if you're going to make any kind of changes at all, I would have to go back to the funder and get their permission, because they are fully supportive of what this particular proposal is about. And so I would just say that either we'll return the 2,000 or we'll have to go back to them to revise. So this is really not about making decisions, which is why I think it's perfectly appropriate for executive session. It's about deciding amongst yourselves how you're going to make those decisions and how you're going to communicate with each other and how best to get to that place where you can come out and be in full public session and communicate respectfully to each other and to us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I see some hand raised. It sounds like this is something that Council Lozon's keen to delay to the next agenda when Councilor Shambel and Wazazak are present, potentially with some revisions to the contract. If there's no objection, looking at the time, would the council by unanimous consent be okay just postponing that?
I mean, I would
Councilor
like,
Booten?
yeah, sorry. I would like to know why the VLCT would support us going into executive session under housing. I'm a little concerned by that. That's really concerning, and we may want to run it by our lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, Councilor Boone, what I can share is that the advice we got from VLCT was specific to the question of, can mediation occur in executive session? So I think as the conversation has shifted, we can VLCT is a really important authority on this. I mean, if we can save a few bucks and ask them, I'd rather do that.
No,
but
that's fine.
But I just for context, that
if it was
a
just
very
mediation?
specific question. Yeah.
Okay,
So I
yeah.
think it's worth getting an updated opinion, but that was the question that was posed to them.
Yeah,
at that
because
time. Yeah.
I mean, it is substantial disadvantage, and we didn't get past that with a couple weeks ago. There's no way we're going to be able to get past it with this.
I think the manager answered your question
Yeah.
correctly, and I
Yeah.
think the question was asked of if you had expanded to the VLCT and you said, well, it's the council going into mediation, why? To facilitate better decisions. They would have been a hard no. We're not employees. There is no employee-employer relationship or agreement. So in the context of how the question was asked, I think the manager gave you the correct answer.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with that. Sorry.
We can mediate it.
You want to mediate? Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want me, I will be in Vermont on the 27th. So if you'd like me to come back, I'm happy to. Just let me know. And nice to meet you thus so much as it is. Thank you.
Likewise, yeah. And thank you for rushing in
Yes.
to check in and join us tonight to explain your background and services.
All right.
So let the record show that. Yeah.
Be continued. I'll leave now.
All right,
Bye,
have a good-
Emily.
have a good evening. So, if no one objects, we'll have the record show that we're postponing this by a week, by unanimous consent of the council
To the next meeting.
to the next meeting. Yeah, postponing to the next meeting, to a time certain. So that takes us to the Sandboard study report on Pike Street.
Yeah, and I know Public Works Director Brian Baker's here too. What I'll share is that council, you received this report on Friday about the same time we did, and about the right after the residents, the impacted residents received it as well, and that's for 36 and 44 Pike Street. And so really the crux of the findings are that, as expected, unfortunately, the slope is as dangerous as we had assumed. So, I think in a way, the bad news is that it's validated our concerns and our decision to red tag these homes. In fact, the report recommends that we continue to not allow occupation of these buildings because of they don't believe it's a safe, it doesn't meet safety factors based on their very extensive math that I don't fully follow, but they say the factors for safety are not met. I think there is one measure of good news, which is we followed up with Sanborn Head because the report doesn't specifically touch it, but the homes at the end of George and Howard are safe, even absent intervention. So that is, I think, a really positive
Yes.
piece of information for us. I toured 44 Pike Street yesterday morning with Chief Cushman, Fire Marshal Copping, and the homeowner. And after having both reviewed the report and touring the home, we're going to make a recommendation for buyouts for both homes, based on these findings, based on even the most preliminary of estimates for the mitigation that they're suggesting. We believe that that buyout is the appropriate next step. On to that point, if the council, if the council chooses to proceed in that manner, there's also a shred of good news, which is that the state will pay the local share. So I confirmed that today with VEM. So very preliminarily, this is a buyout that is going to exceed $200,000. And that includes both the buyout of the home, it includes the demolition, it includes appraisal, it includes all the ancillary parts of the transaction. So that would leave approximately 160 and change and 50 and change for either party, for FEMA, and then for the local share. Like I said, VEM has said that they will cover the state will cover the local share for both of these buyouts, and that's just the number I mentioned was for one buyout, the over 200,000. So we've actually entered into an MOU with VEM, part of one of their pilot programs, that they will manage the paperwork of buyout processes, which is a really huge help because otherwise that's something Janet would have to do. So they will, all they will need from us as we move forward is affirmative direction on which homes will be bought out, and they will take it from the beginning to handing us a deed. And so we are, based on this report that we received on Friday, based on our site visit of the home, we were planning to come to the council with an agenda item on the 27th to consider a buyout for both of these homes. based on what we learned. So I'll turn to Brian now, if there's anything else you would add to that preliminary, our preliminary findings?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. That, I mean, it was, like you said, as bad as we expected, and getting the confirmation from the experts, it was my recommendation, the same as Nicholas's, to proceed with the buyout.
So, Brian, so you have some hand raised here. I don't know who is first.
Nope.
All right, Councilor Stockwell, then Councilor Lozon.
So those houses will be bought out and then that land will never be developed. But can that road, can the area in front of those houses be developed? Is it, or is it not?
I don't know if there's enough on the road. The whole lot will be bought out, and the whole lot will be subject to the no development provision. That leaves a very narrow road, which I'm trying to picture it, Brian. I don't know that's. I don't think that's wide enough for development. It'd be a very tight fit there. We actually think we've preliminary talked that we would probably maintain that road for, it's used as a turnaround for plow trucks, et cetera, is our initial assessment anyway.
And would you do the wall that they
We
talked
could
about?
do the wall. So that was why we asked a follow-up after receiving the report, which is, are Howard and George Street safe absent intervention? And they said yes. So doing a buyout precludes the need to do it. What we were really worried that we would have to do a wall even if the houses were bought out. What this has told us is we will have to continue to do monitoring for some period, but that they believe even absent intervention, those two homes at the end would be safe.
Thank you.
Councilor Lozon?
Thank you. So, I went right to looking at the remediation. I mean, it's probably $500,000 if you're lucky.
Right.
Or
if
more.
everything goes right.
Yeah, if everything goes well, being a little bit familiar with moving earth around. So I look at, so it's good to hear that if we enter the two homes in the buyout program, the city does not have to do additional remediation in order to, we obviously have to monitor, but it does not appear that we have to do additional remediation to keep the neighborhood safe.
Correct.
That's a good thing. But what about the stability of the land, Brian? Would we have to fence it off? Would we have to have no trespassing signs? I mean, at that point, we have 40 homes that have been substantially damaged. And the manager has said it, and I'll repeat it, we cannot afford to buy out 40 homes. And where I'll be a hard no is, sometimes the decision is not as simple as buying out a home. If the city is also buying liability associated with that, that's very difficult, because we have to make decisions not only with empathy for the homeowners, but also with our entire constituency in mind. So, bearing that in mind, what would you recommend? I mean, it would seem to me if you had an area that you knew was still active, you would have to take steps to cordon off that area, have signs, something, so that you're not taking on additional liability, so that children in the neighborhood aren't, crawling up the slope and getting hurt in the event of a slide or killed.
Yeah, I think that we'd probably end up somewhere there. I think right now what I'm thinking, Brian, is I know Green Mountain Power needs access to parts of that trail for maintenance of their power lines that run behind there. But I would imagine, based on this finding, that unfortunately that trail would probably end up as a closed off area for that reason.
Abandoned?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd want to know. I think we'd want to know what the results of the continued monitoring are. So if the land remains stable, there's a chance. But if you haven't been back there, it's not super safe anyway now,
right,
based on how it looks, right? And it's a very it's a deep gash in the land, which has resulted that both trails are very narrow for walking anyhow. So it's not super accessible as it remains at the moment.
Would you be willing to just check with the passive and also my understanding that non-monetary outdoor recreation has a lot of liability exclusions on both on private and public lands in the state of Vermont, and just as part of an open lands ethic but this is obviously a unique case, so it'd be good to know. And I know your original concern was really about what type of liability would you be assuming, or would the city be assuming if the buyouts proceeded? And you feel pretty confident now recommending buyouts that there's really not much liability that the city would be assuming?
The key piece of information was that absent intervention, the homes on Howard and George were safe. And so what I was really worried about was I think it was pretty clear for anyone who's been there that the Pike Street homes were in danger, and this validated that. I was worried that even if the city bought out those two homes, we'd still have to put up a $500,000 wall just to protect those two homes below it. It was really good news, I think, to hear that even absent intervention, those two homes are safe moving forward. So that eliminated, in my eyes, the real big liability to the city.
Councilor Stockwell?
There are landslides on other parts of the railroad bed, which hasn't been surveyed. If you're thinking that we need to, so for the people who are living on Railroad Street, does it seem safe? Or do we just not know?
I don't think we've come across any other areas that are as concerning in terms of that particular stretch. That's the one that we're aware of anyway. That's of concern.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Related to the other landslides in the city and potential buyouts, so I'm just trying to anticipate the questions that probably are going to come to you after this meeting and us, like Andrea Young's house on Courier Street that have been reg tagged, but there's no study pending about. How's staff thinking about that within the context of packaging buyouts for properties that would, if abandoned, would become public nuisances?
So Courier 106 Courier is actually being visited on Friday, which I have to let Ms. Young know if she's listening. She just heard. So I think one of the differences between certainly this particular situation and that one on Courier Street is that it is city land that is threatening those two homes on Pike Street, and 106 Courier is basically threatened by its own lot, right? So that's where I think the city has a different obligation, and had a, I think this Pike Street slide was different for many reasons. One of it was obviously the severity. The other reason was that this was city land that was potentially threatening not just those two homes, but possibly further homes below it. So, and that's been really primarily our approach is to look at, primarily those that have a city-facing element to it.
And of the total scope of landslide homes that have been red tagged, what type of numbers are we talking about?
Landslide homes that have been red tagged. 3.
It's like Portland Street.
Yeah, but Portland is demolished, so I think we're down to 3.
So it's
Okay. Courier and 2 on Pike, because the home on Kinney Place was rehabbed and made safe. They made an adjustment to pass it, to the garage, so they're safe now. And I believe it's down to those 3 at this point. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Councilor Lozon?
We would have to do, I mean, I have been there. We would have to do some work. I mean, there are obvious fractures in the land that, even, when you talk about an attractive nuisance. So even if we did do the buyout, there'd still have to be some, correct, Brian? We'd still have to do some remediation work. We just wouldn't do it to the extent it was noted in the report. We wouldn't be doing the $500,000 wall. But we'd have to do, you'd have to fill those fractures, wouldn't you? I mean,
Um,
otherwise, it's just dangerous.
the report suggested that we put in the monitoring, their, their tubes for monitoring everything, even if we didn't do the wall. But then they also recommended there's I believe it's the east side of it, the end where the erosion has just, made a big ditch. So that type of thing would definitely want to be maintained. But the report didn't recommend any other action, but I would, same as you, as I would recommend at least some site grading to eliminate any type of holes or, hazards that way, but we don't want to increase the load up there. So if you would end up putting riprap and stone, that would just defeat the purpose. So but the report did recommend the monitoring go on even if the wall wasn't installed and the houses are removed, to monitor it and do that erosion protection.
Great. Thank you.
We're looking for some like Elmer's glue for soil, right?
looking for some help up
Yeah.
there. It's
All right.
not good.
Well, this was a great summary, and thanks for adding it to the agenda, Council Lozon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for talking us through it.
If you could just keep us appraised, any update, cost is what I'm really interested in. I mean, I
absolutely.
knew, I knew
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
pretty,
I mean,
but-
we have, we've been in the position of having an application from one of the houses on Pike. So that's why we know the range. It's over 200,000 per home. I think now, both having a sense of sort of the council's direction on this, we're going to be able to, and in our contract with VEM to manage this process for us, we're going to be able to very quickly, I think, get to an application and I think also get a really important resolution for two families that have gone through a really
lot.
hard moment. Yeah.
But I'm looking for the total cost.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Once we have, and that'll come to council on the 27th if we're lucky and we get everything. But I would ballpark 200 a pop.
Right, plus,
Yeah.
but there's additional, as Brian pointed out, additional site work we have to do.
Oh, yes.
So even if we could get, something, Brian, for that, here's your range of options so that we
Yeah.
can see the entire scope of the project, that would be appreciated
Got it.
very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, so that takes us to upcoming business. So our next meeting is February 27th. We're gonna look at that contract again for mediation facilitation, and then are there other items?
So we'll have North End. We'll talk about North End. Probably have a buyout as we discussed tonight, and then planning to propose to the council a contract on a texting notification system that we're in the process of getting a final contract for your consideration.
If you need additional time on that buyout, if it didn't happen on the 27th, I mean, I, for one, would be fine with a special council meeting
Sure.
dedicated to, like on a Wednesday or a Thursday,
Yeah.
those folks have really waited a long time.
Absolutely.
So, and I understand you're going as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And 27th sounds like a pretty full agenda.
Yeah.
So if you do need to have a special, I'd be fine with that.
Got it. Yeah, and I think we're really excited about this. It's a pilot program that VEM is doing to manage the process for communities. So really, as I understand it, I don't want to put too much on Stephanie or her team, but what they've described to us is like, you tell us the address, you give us the lister card, and they run with it, which for us is obviously a huge help because there's a lot of intermediate steps, appraisals, demolition contracts, all of it that they can then hand us a deed. So.
Thank you.
On just one more thing on that buyout, I was just thinking that now that we're down to 3 homes for land in the landslides, and maybe we could, in the interest of trying to get all of them resolved, my approach to my thinking about buyouts all along has been what's the pathway to make people as whole as possible within our means and through the state and federal resources that might come available, recognizing that we have to be strategic and I guess I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity to get all the landslide ones off the table, and consider the buyouts. Are you thinking that we really need to wait for more, to just have more of a evaluation criteria or process for the remainder of the buyouts?
I mean, I think that there's only the one other landslide buyout that I believe is left, which is having a site visit on Friday. In terms of the other, I have certainly my opinions, and we'll make a recommendation based on what we think of that one. But I think in terms of the other sort of next bucket of buyouts that I think would be important to consider are some really clear mitigation related properties. So we've talked a little bit about the Vine Scampini area as a place where there's both a understanding of really significant damage, flood risk, and also interested candidates for buyouts, right? So that seems to me to align to a next location that would be really clear for consideration. I think the other is there appears to be sort of a coalescing of potential buyouts around the Brook Street floodplain. All right, and that's another area where we already have flood mitigation measures that we could expand in that area that could hopefully help some of the people downstream of that. So I think there's a couple of pockets that have real important mitigation value that would not only have mitigation value, but have a critical mass of potential buyouts that help us do more mitigation. And so those are the ones that I think are sort of the next easiest, for lack of a better term.
Is there going to be like a public criteria that staff will use to of the people that have requested for buyouts, to evaluate them, objectively, and then will council have any agency in kind of helping shape those pretty significant policy decisions?
Yeah, those will not be staff decisions. Absolutely. I mean, I think we've talked about when we had VEM here a couple weeks ago, we've talked about this sort of at a staff level, at a high level staff level, of mitigation being certainly a priority, something that is a buyout that's going to increase mitigation measures. And then the other area was homes that couldn't be reasonably raised or somehow otherwise saved. Those were two very high level criteria that we're looking at. I think a lot of it would also be determined by the information we get back from the VEM consultant that's going to do hydrology, right? So we can certainly have layman's perspectives on where the best places to mitigate are, or what the case may be, but we may get a study that says, actually, if you do a buyout in this area, it's going to save a foot of water in this area, and we don't know that. I don't know that, but a hydrologist can tell us that.
And forgive me if you told me and I've forgotten, but is there a deadline for that hydrology?
No, I think Stephanie mentioned that they're still in a contracting process, and so we've been in touch after her appearance here. I mean, they know how critical this is for us.
Would you be able to share that contract just so we can see if it identifies a timeline?
I can ask her. I mean, it's a VEM contract, so I don't have the contract myself, but I am certainly happy to ask Stephanie for whatever materials she has available.
Well, I could email Stephanie too. But Councilor Stockwell?
So all those streets will be looked at, River Street.
Absolutely, yeah. There's another, that's another actual area where there's both a confluence of known hazard and known buyout interest, right? That corner of River and Granite Street. We know not only are several of the homes there interested in buyouts, but across the river, Desrose is interested in a buyout. So that's another area that sort of fits that same model, right? A cluster. It's both a cluster of interested homes for buyouts and an area where we know that mitigation could have an important factor for other places in the city.
Thank you.
I see 2 hands raised, Amy Golford and then Bern Rose. Good evening, Amy.
Hi, I was just curious, I might have missed this because I couldn't make the Ward 3 meeting, but I didn't know if part of the discussion had been the bill that Peter Anthony has, H526, about the Berlin Street Bridge, and it talks about either reconstructing the bridge or demolishing it. And I'm just, that, you know, when you mentioned the Vine Scampini neighborhood, it seems like, and just the entire North End hydrology in general, that whether VTrans does something major to that bridge, either raising it or demolishing it and changing the traffic flow of the North End seems like would be a major change. So I don't know if I've missed any discussion of that. If not,
I don't recall.
I don't recall that coming up.
Discussing that, but definitely encourage you to reach out to Representative Anthony to see if any transportation committee is taking that up to moving that to a higher priority. As I recall, that it's a standalone bill right now. So yeah, until it gets in the T-bill, probably unlikely to go anywhere.
Okay.
Bern Rose.
Hi, thank you. My question was a little similar to Amy's. When we were at the meeting, I heard that from the person doing the river talk, that the Willie Street Bridge is so low the way it's been built, and I imagine from what Amy said that the Berlin Street Bridge is a similar thing, that bridge, once the water reaches it, raises the water level up 3 feet and acts as a dam. And then I thought that Representative Anthony's bill was the removal of the trestle, which catches debris and I think adds a couple of feet to the flooding. And if you take that together, that's about 5 feet. And if we could is there any way that we could have action on those things sooner rather than later, not 10 years down the road? Because if we could reduce the flooding by 5 feet by changing a bridge structure and by getting rid of the trestle, that seems like a place to put our attention. And anyhow, that's just some of my concern. Thank you.
Yeah, very good suggestion. I think the trestle bill is another separate bill that Representative Anthony's had some success on, and as I understand it, Nicholas, correct me if I'm wrong, but once we get the VEM's hydraulic analysis with the river sections, then there'll be a really solid scientific case behind some of the interventions, both places where inundations occurring and where mitigation measures can happen and infrastructure improvements that could occur. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Good questions. All right. All right. Well, we're gonna have another busy meeting on the 27th, and that takes us to roundtable. I'll start with I don't know who to start with. Councilor Lozon.
Thank you. A couple of things. We're going to have fun. I wanted to bring this up during the consent agenda, but I really didn't want to belabor the point. But looking at the exhibits that accompanied Mr. Nelson's lease, we're going to have a lot of fun decorating this thing. So my vote is World Cow. So that's my vote. And I wanted to say, can we put that into the lease that we can have a citywide contest and people can decide how we're going to decorate his silo? My vote's World Cow, Bob, in case you're listening. Barre Community Relief Fund, so proud of the work that the scorers are doing on behalf of folks who need assistance. Sonia Spalding's been leading them and really just doing a yeoman's job with that. In what will likely be our last round, we have over 100 applications. We had been issuing grants up to $1,500. It does not appear, we're gonna try like hell, but it's questionable in terms of whether we can bring everyone up to that $1,500 level based upon the need. And the reason I'm just talking about this a little bit tonight is that there have been more than a few grants that have been questionable and suspect. And I will find you and I will have you prosecuted. because to see, to have to tell someone who's really suffered that you don't have quite enough to get them when everyone has worked so hard, you don't have enough to get them quite to that $1,500 level. And then to see applications that clearly look suspect and look like they're taking advantage. I know where I'll be referring them, and I'll be referring the email and the names or whatever. So that's a downer, so I apologize for that. And this one is even worse. So casualty losses. This is the form. We've all suffered them. This is the publication 547. The good news is that there can be additional relief through tax refunds, through different tax deductions. It's what I do, so I'm going to be partnering with some folks in the administration and some state agencies, and we're going to be doing some webinars to try to explain to people how to calculate a casualty loss. So if you've suffered a loss in the flood, whether it's personal property, commercial property, residential property, how to calculate that. If you've suffered a loss and you've already filed your tax return, don't freak. You can always amend a return. So we're going to be rolling that out in the next 6 weeks or so that we can help people sort of navigate that. The rules are tough, and like anything to do with the revenue code, it can be complicated, but we'll do our best to put on an informative webinar so that folks can sit at home and follow along and calculate their flood losses and see how they can possibly get some additional relief. And with that, that's enough. I'll pass.
Thanks, Councilor Lozon. Councilor Deering?
Just had some wonderful time at the library last week with my 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old in April. Just continually blessed by the experiences that we have in our community, and constantly humbled by the opportunities that we get to serve as civil servants. I'll pass with that.
Councilor Stockwell?
I was glad to have the opportunity to go to all the ward meetings. It was pretty difficult to hear some of the ward meetings, but as Councilor Lozon was pointing out, people handled themselves really well. Their losses are incredible, and they did so well. And part of that was due to the organization. And I just have to say that listening to Janet and Carol and the city manager at the last meeting, it was really great. People have lost everything, and they came in and they got good answers. And Janet was just excellent. She was really, I think, a great source of support and help. At one of the meetings, someone said that there are 121 children who are homeless in the Berry City schools. And I had to, my first reaction was, it can't be that there are that many children that are homeless. Because I know, I've worked with so many homeless families, and I know all the things that happen that fall from that. Children get sick, children lose their place in school, academically, children fall between the cracks. It's such a tragic thing that we were doing this to 121 children. So once again, any kind of housing that we can do, it makes a better world. And with that, I'll pass.
That's good.
Pass.
I'll pass too. So that takes us to an executive session for personnel.
I make a motion for findings.
Second.
There's a motion for findings and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. I did forget to ask if there's any discussion. Sorry, Councilman, you're used to quick on me on that one. But if there's no discussion, I'll let that vote stand. All right.
Motion to go into executive session and include the manager and Scott Cameron for personnel.
All right. There's a motion. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
And,
All those opposed?
and no action, Dave.
Ayes have it. Thanks, Tess. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, great summary.
I got the door on.
Thanks, Adam. All right.
Gotta do a round thing.
Toodles all.
Toodaloo.
Evening,
See, those
Carol.
of you who will be here tomorrow evening.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, you will. It's not going to be a bad meeting.
No, well, I've tried to provide as much
Nicholas Durella Castro.
Hey, Nicholas. I don't see it. Can you send it again? Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm in the main room. I'm in the main room right now. And it's still recording. Got it.